Hi, this is Sharon Pender. Thank you for stopping by and welcome to our Hot Chat podcast edition. Where is the money? And this is episode 2 in our series of Minority Business Connections. I am President and CEO of the Capital Regions Minority Supply Development Council and operator of the MBDA Business Center, Washington, D.C., and the MBDA Federal Procurement Center, servicing the greater Washington, D.C. area, the state of Maryland, and Northern Virginia. So again, welcome to our Hot Chat podcast. And we're featuring today U.S. Senator Chris Van Hollen. We've created this podcast especially for you to get insight of legislation that's important to us, particularly for minority businesses, to listen to a leader that kind of knows what's going on, that gets us in terms of what we're trying to achieve and what impact it is to minority business owners. This conversation, I guarantee you, will be insightful and more to come in dynamic one-on-one conversations with CEOs, contracting officers, minority businesses, supply diversity professionals, and procurement leaders from some of the leading companies in America. It is our goal to highlight the challenges, to let you know what the breakthroughs are, resources, and most important, where are the opportunities? That's why we always said we follow the money. Where is the money that exists from our vast network from across the region and across the country? More importantly, we'd like to hear from you. And be sure to visit our site at www.crmsdccares.com. We've got great content, and follow us on our social media platforms. But before we do that, we have to pay attention, give some attention to those sponsors that we certainly appreciate, that without them, this would not be possible. Exelon, our title sponsor, which of course is BGE and Pepco Holdings. And of course, we have Southwest Airlines. And pay attention, we may have some tickets available for you during this conversation. And of course, the Hilton, our MBE sponsors, AMCUS, JDC Events, CompuGain, of course, Capital One, SB and Company, and Stroud Priest, all MBEs. And then AARP, AT&T, BAE Systems, Bank of America, BWI Airport, Dominion Energy, Ellison, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FRS, Horseshoe, Ideal, Leidos, Lockheed Martin, M&T Bank, Marriott McCormick, Metropolitan Washington Airport, National Bid Network, Washington Gas, Northrop Grumman, Peapod, Sodexo, Truist, Metro, WSSC, Wells Fargo, Zillion Technologies, and the United States Postal Service. So again, thank you, sponsors. Without your support, we could not do what we do in terms of providing resources, advice, advocacy, and pointing our minority businesses in the direction of opportunities. With that said, I'd like to get started today with our conversation with one of my favorite folks, and that is Senator Chris Van Hollen. Let me tell you a little bit about him, if you don't already know. Senator Hollen was Van Hollen was elected to the U.S. Senate by the people of Maryland in November of 2016. His top priorities include creating more and better jobs, strengthening small businesses, and increasing educational and job training opportunities for individuals for all ages in every community. Senator Van Hollen started his time in public service as a member of the Maryland State Legislature. In 2015, he released a comprehensive plan to address the problems of growing inequality in America and provide a blueprint for building an economy that works for everyone. Senator Van Hollen is proud to have worked successfully with members of both parties to pass bipartisan legislation, and he sits on the Appropriations Committee, Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee, Foreign Relations Committee, and the Budget Committee. He's a busy, busy man. Welcome, Senator Chris Van Hollen. How are you doing today?
Well, thank you, Sharon. It's great to be with you on Hot Chat. I look forward to the time we can meet in person again. And I want to thank you for all your leadership as president and CEO of the Capital Region Minority Supplier Development Council. It's been an honor to work with you over the years and look forward to continuing to do so.
And I certainly appreciate that. I remember I've been in this job, Senator, now for 6 years. It's like 6 fast years. But what I will always remember, as you kind of look back over your shoulder, is that you were always there for those important milestones for us. I remember when I just started this job. I remember when we won 5 years ago our MBDA grants, and you did the ribbon cutting for us. But I remember the best thing, I think, is coming on Capitol Hill when we had issues with our MBDA grants, and you were the first person we reached out to, and you welcomed us, you guided us, and more importantly, you helped solve the problem. And so for that, on behalf of the minority business community, we will always be very, very grateful for that. So thank you.
Well, thank you. You're such an important engine of opportunity for small businesses, especially minority owned businesses. And we could not, grow successfully in our communities without the work you do. So I'm looking forward to this conversation because I think there is a lot more opportunity out there.
I think so too. I just need to ask you one burning question for me. How did you decide to be a public servant? And the reason I'm asking that question, because it can be a thankless job. And so there has to be something special within that individual to make the decision to serve the public. So what was that for you? Why did you make this decision?
Well, I really decided this was a way to try to make a difference. And there are many ways that people can, make a difference in their lives for the greater community. But, my story is my father was from Baltimore City. He went into the Navy. He married my mom. He went into the Foreign Service, actually. So I actually grew up some of my early years overseas. It was a back and forth life. And that gave me insights into two things. One, it was how the rest of the world looked to America as a beacon of hope. But it also allowed me to hold up a mirror to America and ask the simple question, are we really living up to our ideals of equal rights and equal justice and equal opportunity? It was very clear that we have a very long way to go, that we've made substantial progress, but we have a long journey still ahead. And my view was that by getting into public service, I could help close that distance and bring us a little closer to our ideal of equality and justice for all. And again, there are many ways to serve, but public office is one way I saw making a difference. It can be very frustrating at times.
I would imagine.
But I do think over the long run, we're headed in the right direction, despite some big bumps along.
Sure. And that's great to know, because what it tells me, Senator, that your conviction is deep within your soul. And for that, we kind of thank you. And we thank your family, too, because we know there's great sacrifices for a leader with your family when you make that commitment as well. I want to talk a little bit about your interest in inequality has been quite some time, and it's been kind of the foundation of your service. And so you've been on the front line of fighting on, for wage gap, to looking at just the financial frailties of the American family. So I'd like your opinion, and I don't want to get into the American Jobs Plan, but I'd like your opinion, for example, of certain things that are happening in this country right now. What's happening in Georgia, in terms of that legislation that was just, can you give me a perspective? Your perspective around that?
Yes, absolutely. We're at a moment of reckoning in our country. It's a moment of opportunity, but also a moment of great danger because in the aftermath of the election of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, we've encountered the Donald Trump big lie, which is the false claim that somehow Donald Trump was cheated out of this presidential election, which is not true, of course, but you see state legislatures like Georgia, like Texas, like other places around the country now trying to put up barriers to voting. Instead of trying to win elections by addition, they're trying to win by subtraction, by making it harder for people to access the polls. And they're targeting minority voters, they're targeting people of color, they're targeting younger voters. And this, of course, comes in the aftermath of not just the Joe Biden election in Georgia, but also the election of Reverend Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff. And so the way we're supposed to win elections in America is the candidates make their case to the people, they lay out their agenda, and you try to persuade more people to vote for you rather than put up barriers so that fewer people can access the polls. So we've got to pass this bill at the federal level called the For the People Act. And that would create national standards to protect the right to vote. We'd also get rid of secret money in politics.
Mm-hmm. And you said that's For the People?
It's For the People Act. It's H.R. 1, which has already passed the House of Representatives. In the Senate, it's Senate Bill 1. And it is now in the Senate Rules Committee, and it is a top priority, as President Biden has said. Failure is not an option because we cannot have a country where people buy into the big lie and then erect barriers to voting to try to keep people from the polls. So we've got to get this bill passed.
Okay. And Senator, through this conversation, I'm going to ask you, what can minority businesses do? Because we represent a group of business folks. And so, and public policy determines the behavior in the marketplace. So what I'm going to be asking, what can we do to kind of help support these efforts, Senate Bill 1, For the People? And so we'll get that word out, but certainly would love to understand some guidance there.
Sure. Well, just on that point, look, we're at a very turbulent time in our politics, but in my view, business leaders have an obligation to speak out to strengthen our democracy because any business that's successful has to be part of a community that adheres to our fundamental principles and the rule of law. And that is why I think it's totally appropriate, for example, that Major League Baseball decided that they're not going to have the All-Star game in Atlanta, Georgia. It's perfectly acceptable, in fact, appropriate, I think, for companies like Delta and
Coca-Cola
and others to be speaking out. And I that's part of the American democratic system. So I encourage we saw, of course, a number of Black CEOs writing in.
Yes.
Well, so this is really important. I'm so glad you brought it up.
Yeah. The other thing I want to talk about too, because I know that, and by the way, not to digress too much, it's always interesting when you listen to folks to see what your common ground is. I grew up in Baltimore. My father was in the Navy. And matter of fact, that's how he got to Baltimore. It was one of the ports. But anyway, that's another conversation for another time. But I know that for a while you represented Montgomery County, and when you look at its population, I'm talking about the Asian population. I live in Howard County, where there is a big Asian population. I wanted to get your perspective around what's happening to the Asian community, one of our minority communities, and get your perspective around that.
This has been incredibly alarming to watch what's happened across our country. And of course, the African American community has been subject of these kind of hate crimes in the past. And of course, a big part of our journey is overcoming the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow. The Asian American community has also been the target of these hate crimes. It really speaks to the importance of two things. One is leaders really have to speak up whenever we see hate. And unfortunately, our previous president, Donald Trump, actually fanned the flames of
yes,
right? He actually tried to raise himself up politically by turning other people on each other based on race or religion, ethnicity, and of course, the words he used to describe the coronavirus, COVID-19, Kung flu, and things like this really made the Asian American community a target. So that was just a part of his despicable, divisive style. we all need to not only speak out, but then we need to really enforce our laws on hate crime, and it's going to be a priority of the Justice Department, the Biden administration Justice Department under Attorney General Merrick Garland, to really go after hate crimes, go after white supremacy, and go after wherever bigotry raises its ugly head. It's going to be very important that we all be vigilant and work to bring our country together. I mean, that, as Joe Biden said, is necessary to restore and help heal the soul of America, but even more, I think, to make sure we continue down the path toward a more perfect union.
And do you think that that would also be the case as we look at right now the trial that's going on for the murder of George Floyd and all of that, the reckoning that happened last year as a result of that? Do you think that is there legislation that should be enforced or an additional legislation to ensure that we don't live through that again? Any thoughts there?
Yes, it's essential that we pass a bill called the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act,
Okay.
which creates very important provisions for better police accountability, more transparency. This is a bill that's passed the House of Representatives. It's now in the United States Senate. I'm a co-sponsor of the bill. I also think we should pass another bill that I've introduced along with Congresswoman Karen Bass, called the Community Response Act. And it's really a complement to the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. That act is about police accountability. But
Okay.
we also need some systemic change in how we respond to so many situations that arise in the community. If you look at the statistics, so many of these cases where you have police responding to an incident and you see this escalation leading to tragic killing, many cases it's a situation of a mental health situation. It could be substance use disorder, responding to homelessness. So we have proposed that we create alternative response mechanisms where appropriate. So where use of force is not going to be necessary, let's send folks who are trained to try to de-escalate. Let's send people who have dealt with mental health issues where that's the root of a particular cause. So what we do is say the federal government wants to support cities and communities that want to establish alternative responses to these emergencies where an alternative is appropriate. And I'm pleased to say that the mayor of Baltimore City, Mayor Scott, somebody that we've been working with, he's going to launch a sort of pilot project along these lines.
Oh, that's perfect. That's perfect. And again, so to reiterate for folks that are listening to us, in terms of supporting, you said that there was the that new legislation that you're introducing, the Community Response Act.
That's correct.
Has it been introduced, and what can we do to support it?
So Congresswoman Karen Bass and I introduced it last year. We are going to reintroduce it in the coming weeks. We just took additional input from some of the stakeholders, but we will be reintroducing it. I'll let you know as soon as we do. And anything you and your members can do to support it, I think would give it a lift, would give it a boost. I think we have lots of strong support, but we need more to get it over the finish line.
And so, by that, Senator, would that would it help if, for example, we reached out to our legislators to let them know to support it? Is that because we can do that across the country, to let them know that they should support that? And the one for George Floyd, that one, what was the name of that one again?
That's called the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act.
Okay.
And that has been reintroduced. It's already passed the House of Representatives. And we're going to be taking it up in the Senate. The exact timetable it remains to be seen, but that is going to be a priority too. Okay.
And so when that happens, if we can know that, we will then absolutely engage and
Good.
let folks know that should happen as well. So we thank you for your work there. There's lots going on, right? And so I'd like to talk a little bit right now about President Biden's American jobs plan, I guess, AKA the Infrastructure Act. Just wanted to get your perspective there about the plan itself. I know there's, of course, controversy, anything of this magnitude, but if you can give us a perspective, that would just be awesome.
Yes, I mean, this is a very important next step. Of course, the first piece of legislation was the America Rescue Plan, which we passed a number of weeks ago to both finally defeat this virus once and for all, to help those families and workers and small businesses that have been especially hard hit, give us a boost, give the economy a boost as we come out of the pandemic. This next initiative, the American Jobs Plan, is really to modernize our infrastructure throughout the country. And as President Biden has said, it's not just what people think of as sort of the 20th century infrastructure. Yes, it does include fixing our roads and our bridges and our transit systems, but it goes beyond that to include things like building out universal access to broadband, making sure that we put people to work, building a new cleaner energy grid, that we deal with the housing crisis. The affordable housing crisis is an important part of this plan. And those are just some elements of it, in addition to making sure that we invest in our cutting edge research in order to compete with China and others who are trying to beat us at our own game. And importantly, it includes many provisions to ensure the active participation of minority-owned businesses and businesses and small businesses generally and in rural areas as part of this American Jobs.
That's fantastic. How do we ensure, for example, when you look at when I think of infrastructure, I think of the failing pipes, or I think of the crumbling bridges and those kinds of things that happen. How can there be an assurance that when you look at urban areas that tend to be in cities that are mostly occupied by the poorest in our population, that they aren't the ones at the bottom of the list when things are done? What can happen from that perspective, in your opinion?
Well, I think that is the central focus of a lot of this legislation, which is to revitalize our urban cores, and especially help those part of our cities that have been left behind, for a very long time. And it's comprehensive in that sense, because it will focus resources on transit systems so people can get to and from work more easily. It's going to focus on a lot of job training opportunities, because when we think about infrastructure, we often think of hardware, but there's also the software. I mean, after all, what makes businesses run is people power, in addition to capital and equipment. And so a big part of this is also job training, workforce training. And there's a focus here on revitalizing our urban cores, our cities. And so that is going to be a big part of my focus as this bill goes through the House and the Senate, is to make sure that communities of color that have been left behind really get a significant boost from the American Jobs Bill. Because right now, as we know, we see higher unemployment rates in urban areas. We see higher unemployment rates among African Americans. So our goal is to make sure that we close those gaps in income inequality and wealth inequality. I'm not under illusions that happens overnight, but it happens only if we're deliberate and intentional about making those investments.
Key words being deliberate and intentional. I think that's real key. It looks like too that with the enormous price tag of things of this nature, there then breeds opportunity, that minority businesses, for example, can have exposure to possible contracts as it comes down the pipes of some of this. I'm just trying to figure out how we can then be best prepared for that, right? Because when you look at something of this nature, it may come by once in a lifetime of a business. And so, how do we make sure that minority businesses are at the table as this all emerges, as opposed to stuff being thrown over the wall and minority businesses scrambling to figure out how to be a part of? Any advice there?
Well, yes, and that's why I think the work that you're doing is so important to keep your members informed of the opportunities that are going to arise, and also to provide input as we shape this bill in the United States House and Senate, because the president's proposal is, of course, the first step. It's got to go through the entire process, but he was very clear when he unveiled this the other day in Pittsburgh that this was an opportunity to make investments and provide contracts to communities that have been left behind in the past. He specifically mentioned minority-owned businesses, smaller businesses in rural areas, and he made it clear that this is going to be a whole of government effort, and that the whole of government is going to be focused on achieving these goals together. But I do think that as we go through this process, it's essential that everybody, focus on what's in the bill, and that we work together collaboratively. And then once it's passed, that everybody be aware of what the opportunities are. And on that point, I will say that there are a number of provisions in bills that we've already passed, including the bill we passed in December on a bipartisan basis, as well as the American Rescue Plan, that have substantial resources in them for small businesses and minority-owned businesses. And it's going to be important that everybody be fully informed of those opportunities as well.
And I think, Senator, that to your point, there are other opportunities that minority businesses can look at. I think about, for example, the Defense Production Act. And traditionally that's not some place that we would look, but because of the opportunity there, I think that the president, for example, through Title III that establishes the president's authority to invest in specific industries, there may be the opportunity there that a focus can be on the support of minority businesses as relates to manufacturing, or any COVID related materials, and maybe those are the things that are there too. So I know it will take someone of your vision to kind of help look at, to your point, some existing things that are there, so that we can figure out how minority businesses can take advantage of it. And for that, I thank you as well.
Well, the president mentioned there are a couple things in the plan that specifically relate to minority businesses. He mentioned really beefing up the manufacturing extension partnership. This is, out of the Department of Commerce to try to make sure that the United States remains competitive in manufacturing. And he specifically mentioned targeting some of those funds to minority-owned businesses. He also talked about more money for cutting-edge research in universities and colleges, and specifically said that he wanted to put aside $20 billion for HBCUs and minority-serving institutions. So there's also an opportunity on the research front for more partnerships between businesses and colleges and universities as they develop and spin off some of their research. And the fact that there will be more focus on HBCUs. Of course, we have 4 great HBCUs in the state of Maryland, and so that's another big opportunity.
And I was about to ask you about HBCUs, so that's fantastic. You're right. Saw what just happened recently in the state of Maryland around HBCUs. Our MBDA Federal Procurement Center is working with the White House initiative as it relates to HBCUs as well. relative to helping them build capacity in federal programming, that kind of thing. And so the opportunities are there. We appreciate that you're kind of running tackling for us so that we could see those things that we can take advantage of and spread the word to our businesses that those there's a future in doing those kinds of things. As we kind of bring the conversation to closure, is there anything else, Senator, that you might want to share with our audience?
Yes, I do want to mention a couple things that were in the American Rescue Plan, which of course is now law, and the bill that we passed in December. One relates to community-based lending, because that is, of course, a source of loans and capital for many startup small businesses. CDFIs are. And minority depository institutions. And there was an infusion of about $12 billion into CDFIs as part of the bill we passed in December. And I was just on the phone the other day with the Secretary of Treasury, Janet Yellen. Those programs right now are being developed out of the Department of Treasury in terms of how they're going to be structured. So I do want to specifically mention that. The PPP program, we remember that got rolled out first in the CARES Act. It had lots of problems in its original form. It was not easily accessible by many of the smaller businesses. But over the last year and a couple months, it has been significantly improved and much better targeted to small businesses and minority-owned businesses. We extended the deadline for PPP applications to the end of May. So people should be aware of that particular deadline. The American Rescue Plan also includes funds specifically for, restaurants, those in the hospitality industry, as well as venues, that have been especially hard hit as in terms of customers. So I do just want to, point out that those programs are right now, they're in the pipeline. There's also a small business credit program, $10 billion as part of the American Rescue Plan that will be run through states. So Maryland will be using those funds to set up its own small business sort of lending and capital support programs. So those can be very important either to an ongoing enterprise or, of course, a startup. I just want to mention that in addition to the American Jobs Plan, which is going to be so important to giving our country the boost it needs to modernize our infrastructure, there are also these programs that are in the pipeline from earlier bills that and if people have questions, they're of course feel free to contact my office, and we're happy to go over them with anybody who's interested.
That is outstanding. We're actually we need to make sure that our constituents learn about those things as well. So I'm so glad we're having this conversation. I've learned a tremendous amount of things here. So that is outstanding, outstanding things that are going on Capitol Hill. Anything else, Senator?
Well, those are we talked at the beginning about the importance of protecting the right to vote by creating a minimum national set of standards that is so important. We've got to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, and then we've got to pass a number of other bills that have made their way through the House of Representatives that are in the Senate, and then we've got to, of course, pass this American Jobs Plan. And the president will soon be announcing, part 2 of the American Jobs Plan, which will include major investments in our education and school system. This has been a priority of mine from the beginning, where we've got to make sure that we fund 100% early education, early Head Start programs, Head Start programs. Every child who's eligible for one of those programs should be able to participate in those programs. And that will also include additional support for higher education. I think it'll be community college will be free under his proposal. He'll deal with student debt issues. So the next bill is also going to be an important part of a successful future for everybody.
That is outstanding, ladies and gentlemen. You have heard it here first, of all the things that are percolating on Capitol Hill with our government. And so thank you very, very much. Senator Van Hollen, thank you again for being that fighter on the front line for us and all the things that you're going on. I'm exhausted about listening to all the things you're doing.
Well, it was a good hot chat. It was good. A lot of hot issues to talk about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we thank you so very much for your time.
Well, thank you. Thanks for doing what you're doing, Sharon. And I look forward to, continuing to work with you.
Okay. Outstanding. Thank you. Take care.
You too.
Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here. Senator Van Hollen giving us talk about hot chat, right? Giving us some real clear messages around what's happening that is that's advantageous for people of color and businesses of color. So we thank you for tuning in this edition of Hot Chat, Minority Business Connection, and we'll see you the next time. We have some upcoming things that you may be interested in, but we'll tell you to actually make sure that you bookmark our CRMSDC cares.com. We'll have this, not only this particular chat, but other prior webinars and other chats. But more importantly, stay tuned there as we post information about upcoming legislation that you need to support, as well as some research that we'll be posting there as well. So CRMSDC.org, as well as our MBDA centers, our Minority Business Development Center, Federal Procurement Center, and our MBDA Business Center, Washington, D.C. Again, thank you. I'm Sharon Pender, and I'll see you the next time. Bye-bye.